Hey friends, Alvin here. We are continuing on with our interview series, and today I am pleased to be joined by Dinal Perera, who's the youth pastor at Malvern Baptist Church. Welcome, Dinal.
Hi, Alvin. Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you here. And so, as we've been continuing on with the series, the very first question I've been asking everyone is this. So, with your students right now, since March break, what have you seen change in them so far?
There's been quite a few changes. I think for the most part, the changes are somewhat superficial, in the sense of moving from face-to-face meetings to virtual is a bit of an adjustment, but for the most part, we managed to embrace the technology that at our disposal. And for the youth, I mean, this is really in their field of interest. If anything that distracts them more and anything that absorbs their time, it is social media and technology to that degree. So for me, it's been an adjustment, but it looks like it's moving, thankfully, miraculously at a good pace. The changes in the youth, what they're facing is just more of the uncertainty of school. So for most of them, the online format poses many challenges. Specifically, not having a teacher on standby can be difficult. And I think that's really what they're wrestling with more than anything else, to be honest with you. I think, a lot of them are thankful that they're at home and not in school. So that was encouraging and discouraging for me at the same time, but it has shifted my focus when it comes to praying strategically for the youth. So that has been a significant change for myself when it comes to youth ministry. So what I mean by my prayers changing specifically, I mean, for the most part, they're doing okay, but in some ways, they struggle with, I think for many of us, boredom and restlessness. So, for them, it propels them into a world of social media way more than before. So my prayers are now really geared towards the youth not falling into spiritual stagnancy. I think of the book of Proverbs that says, "Do not love sleep or you will grow poor. Stay awake and you will have food to spare." So I think for them, especially I would even say for the more active ones, it's very easy for them to fall into some sort of spiritual sleep around them. And I think for them, everything else around, everything else outside of the Bible and any spiritual exercises that may be life-giving are dissolving because everything else around them is more seductive and entertaining. So my prayer is now that they not only see their relationship with God as a priority, but they see it really, and I've always said this before, and I say it to the youth, I hope they see their relationship with God as the center of all their priorities. That it gives life to every area that God is calling to them now. So whether it's their family, being at home, maintaining servitude in the midst of turmoil, difficulty, but at the same time, just being faithful to the time that has been allotted to them, to see it as a blessing and something that's less burdensome and boring. So I just think it's praying that they become more proactive. So praying earnestly for me, but also strategically. So I think like many of us, we have time to press into the Word of God and pursue spiritual exercises, and just for them to keep in mind that they may not get this time back. And the Bible says to remember the Lord when you're young. So, having this much vitality is an asset if you recognize it's an asset and how that should be geared towards things that actually are life-giving. And, in some cases, we look at discussions around social media. We look at the benefits or the pros and the cons. But I really try and hone in on the negativity. And I think, in most cases I think like a lot of us, when we gravitate towards things that provide temporal satisfaction, we're not sure how this plays out later on in life. And for them, my discussions around the importance of devotional time, the importance of pressing into the things of God, I have to really emphasize the result of that. Otherwise, it's disconnected and it's a bit lofty. So that would be the major changes I find, to be honest with you.
And so I'm curious, how have you found their level of consciousness in terms of that kind of spiritual stagnation that you were mentioning a moment ago?
Some of them, the ones who've taken up leadership, like the student leaders, are very well aware of that. So they know what to do. I think the challenge is the motivation that lacks. So I think for them, their consciousness only goes so far, especially when they're not in an environment that is conducive to healthy growth. At times, when I say healthy growth, I mean sometimes even me just being at home, not doing anything, even though the environment is healthy, but when my motivation lacks, it doesn't move me into a place where I am so focused on pursuing things that are going to be character building and moving towards things that God wants me to move towards. So I think for some of them who've maintained a sense of spirituality and faith in their life from church, and they understand the importance of it. I think for me, my discussions revolve around, we understand the importance of it. Now, what do we do, and how do we remove the distractions that are in our environment to ensure that we're focused? And I think that's kind of my emphasis when it comes to prayer time. So even to, part two of your question would be, or the answer to your question would be, so first is consciousness. Number two is practicality. The practicality looks like, taking very strong measures to ensure that our focus and the practice of our focus is of the utmost importance, even before reading the Bible. So if that means going into your room, shutting off the phone, turning off the TV, closing the door, and sitting down, maintaining a good posture so our minds are focused. I try and draw the parallel between their emphasis and their focus on school and the amount of energy they give into that, and how sometimes the results that we have when we pursue God first and foremost are significantly greater. So using that same energy, that same momentum, that same focus, and moving it towards things of the spiritual have tremendous effects. So moving their consciousness to the practicality, I find is helpful.
So, earlier you were mentioning how you've been talking through with them both the pros and cons of social media, and how that's sometimes, I'm not sure if this is the exact words you use, but I'll paraphrase, the seduction of social media. And so right now, since it seems like everything's been thrown online, how do you balance that in this ministry?
Yeah, I call our phones the dopamine device. It's it's one of those things where you have to affirm the positivities, because I think the moment you start making a quick judgment call, and categorizing social media and technology as something that is completely and fully damaging, you can very quickly alienate them. So I try and correspond with them through, like, I use social media. I use Instagram, and that's our main portal. That's our main channel to communicate, only because it's the one thing that we all have. So I think drawing the balance. So, before the whole COVID thing happened, I actually took them through a few teachings on the benefits or the pros and the cons of social media, and some of the healthy things it produces, and how we can be affirmed through certain outlets. But I also focused on the topic of depression and anxiety, and I tied that into social media. And it's almost the almost unspoken, unsaid issue that's flying under the radar with what they're doing and what they're looking at. So they don't know how to categorize it in some cases, but they know that the feelings are there. So I talk about what the feelings, if not tended to, can produce. So we look at things that are healthy. We look at things that are producing some sort of momentum and drive within our life, where we feel like we're here for a purpose, so might as well digest things and look at things that accommodate that purpose in my life, and that whatever God wants to do with me. So, I mean, that's kind of the balance that I try and have with them.
Just to switch gears a little bit here, if
Mm-hmm.
I remember correctly, I believe you're bivocational. You actually have a couple of different things you venture into, including youth ministry at Malvern. So right now, in the last I guess couple of months now, how has that management gone for you personally?
It's it's been good because I can work from my office. So I would say my full-time job for the most part is managing an IT employment firm. So I think with the advantage of actually being in the office and still able to allot time to correspond with the youth is good. So I've adjusted to that fairly well. The only thing that has been difficult for the most part is video recording and technology in that end, because I feel like I have way more appreciation for those who have tampered with that and who have developed that art and craft, only because now I understand the headache it is to edit and to go back and to cut and to crop and to, make sure my voice sounds okay and then send it off because I'm satisfied. So yeah, that's been the biggest adjustment for me, I would say, when it comes to managing the work and the ministry or my vocational call when it comes to Malvern Baptist.
So, can you give me an example right now of what you might term as a success story through the last few weeks of this pandemic?
Um, so, I spoke about the disadvantages. Um, I will say some of the success stories have to do with virtual communication. So what I mean by that is, I think just like many of us who we go online, watch sermons, a lot of times we fall into distractions as well, so we can stop and play and rewind. So one of the advantages I find now, one of the successes I find now is that the messages that I'm communicating virtually, the youth can go back to it, rewind, pause, highlight points that are emphasized and punctuated. It serves as a good reference point. So now the advantage is I can reach a larger audience. So in some cases, there are youth who did not attend as frequently due to transportation or scheduling issues. So with video messages, I find that you can accommodate others who don't have this luxury. So I think, even for Instagram, it's the common social media outlet that we all have. So I'm using it and utilizing it a lot more. And I use this platform to communicate dates and times of meetings, sending them questions and video messages. And yeah, to be honest with you, it's something that I've seen as a great opportunity if I see it as an opportunity. So I'm trying to look at what couldn't I have done when we were meeting face to face, and what were the challenges. And I always find that the the virtual route actually fills in those gaps. So that's a huge advantage for me, and that's a huge advantage for the youth ministry. And I think it accommodates them more because they're at home, they're in their place of comfort. But yeah, that would be a success story for me.
And so, I mean, if you allude to some of the different elements that you've been using so far in the last few weeks, so what has been I mean, I guess, can you outline what your overall approach has been using Instagram in terms of how you engage with your youth ministry right now?
So with Instagram, we have a message board. So we have a group chat that we've created. So I use that to send video from my drive. I use that to send and copy documents so they can have with them. So when I send them youth messages, it's usually through that message board because all of them are on there. But at the same time, it serves as a connecting portal to the actual Instagram page that we have for NBC Youth. So going forward, Instagram now, I mean, I didn't know this, but you're able to actually release videos that are a lot longer than what I expected. So even 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So that's amazing. So I think it's Watch or it's IGTV. So we'll be utilizing that tool, and that's going to reach a larger audience, to those youth who are on that page, but who didn't actually have the luxury of attending some of our youth programs, like I said before, because of transportation or whatever issues. So Instagram is a good portal for that, and it serves as a good way of connecting with them collectively, but also it's a great way of me connecting with them individually. So some of the youth leaders that have assigned tasks to manage the social media page is a great way. I use that portal to send videos and pictures and words of encouragement to. So yeah, I would say that would be the only way that I can use Instagram.
And as youth ministries, as churches are considering what does the next phase look like for them, as you've been learning and reflecting over the last few weeks as things are evolving, what are some key insights that you're looking to take into the next few months, maybe the next year or two?
Um, Key insights when the church opens up, or just in general?
Well, I mean, I think within the youth ministry context, and then if you want, even expanding beyond that.
Yeah, so I think now when it comes to the craft that we've had to develop out of necessity, like video recording, and social media, that's going to spill into the next phase or next stage of our ministry. I think it's a great way to go. I think it's a good way to reach people, again, who can't come out, but I also think it's a great way of their friends recommending messages or words of encouragement through these social media outlets. So I think keeping that going, keeping the technology component going is important. And to be honest with you, I think just, some of the insights that I've learned have to do with how to manage time more than anything else. And I think if there's anything that I've learned from this time is that sometimes when we say we don't have enough time, I find that that can be just an excuse, because even when we do have the time, there's little that motivates us to pursue that which is spiritual. So the flesh does sometimes war against the spirit. So when I say that time management is incredibly important, especially now, encouraging them to make hard and wise decisions about where their time goes, that's important, but that's also sustaining to their very, I would say their very involvement in the things that they're doing right now. So specifically in school. So what they need to interact with their friends, what they need to be focused, what they need to interact in a household that doesn't communicate as much. So I would say, learning the value of time, learning the gift of time, understanding how to manage that gift in which it's given to you is important for me. That's a big takeaway point for me. I think, something I've learned from leaders and mentors, especially extroverts who had to embrace this truth, is that the most neglected form of communication is listening. And, especially when you're looking at how it parallels with apologetics, you value the person at times when it comes to listening and wanting some of their deeper or deep-rooted responses and things that they're going through in their life. And the last thing they need someone is just going on and on and on and preaching and teaching about things that sometimes they already know. So I think once you actually give them that space to talk, the floodgates open. I think for most of them, they don't have people who take the time out to value what they have to say. And that causes a big rift in the communication barrier. So I think in order to build, remember John Vanier said this, in order to build a community of transparency, you can't speak with generalities and platitudes, but you do have to create an environment of trust. In order to create an environment of trust, there requires a great deal of intentionality and acknowledging that we are so quick to provide an answer for relief. But if we're quick to actually value the person, it'll be a lot easier to stop, pause, and allow them to speak. And you'd be surprised at the insight that is drawn from that.
So as we're drawing to a close in our interview here, what's a word of wisdom, a word of insight, or a word of encouragement that you would want to give to those who are watching right now?
Yeah, I would say similar to what I just mentioned, being smart about where and how we invest our energy. The questions I would always pose is it soul enriching and causing you to develop character, or is it crippling? I've been thinking about the recent cases of depression and suicide amongst pastors. Personally, knowing those in leadership who struggle with this, I can't tell you how important it is to ensure that your soul is taken care of. I believe, and I've said this before, that we have subconsciously digested ideas or messages pertaining to guilt-ridden teachings of self-sacrifice. So depending on the cultural context in which you come from, I would say it can be hard to embrace this idea of the productivity of rest. But I've learned that you have to wrestle with that. You have to really do whatever you can to make sure that you fight for those moments of rest that are helpful not only for yourself, but the people around you. So you have to see that it not only benefits you, but it benefits and it shapens and it encourages the people that are immediately around you. So it's fuel for you to be more effective in the areas that God has entrusted you with. So whatever that looks like for you, for myself, I would say the way I take my Sabbath rest, let's put it that way, is, one night of the week, I come back to my office and I have my Bible and I have my journal and I just, think and I pray and I reflect and I give thanks. And I look at what God has done and what God is doing. And that, I'll be honest with you, has a significant effect on how I engage the week following up. And so I think it's important for leaders and young pastors to ensure that rest is productive and that we should pursue it. and we should ensure that this is a priority in our life. As we look at Christ being the spiritual rest, we have to ensure that he cares very much for our soul and that it's not a selfish thing to take care of ourselves.
No, I think those are very helpful reminders for all of us as we continue on over the next few weeks. So Dinal, I appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing both things that you've learned, but also things that we consider for all of us to take forward with. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Alvin. I appreciate the time.